this a dream? Good morning, everybody. Just wanted to set the mood there. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm not going to have the chat open because I'm already confused as it is. I'm looking at too many things. So I'm just going to talk for the next 20 minutes or so. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land which I work and live on, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and any First Nations people who might be on this Zoom call right now with us. So it's hard to think about a theme such as purpose without entering into an existential mood, particularly at a time like right now. Most of us will have made some pretty big changes to our lives in the last month. We're all on a video call right now, but it's not that strange. It's become a new normal and we're adapting. Look at us. I mean, I don't know how well I'm actually adapting right now. I'm finding it quite overwhelming. But it could be dystopian. But I'm kind of feeling guiltily some kind of relief at the reprieve of the busy pace that I was trying to keep up. It takes me back to childhood or adolescence, those days when you really didn't want to go to school or to go to your crappy job, so you'd wish for something horrible to happen, like a world catastrophe. And now we're living through one. Big things are happening, and they are bigger than our creative pursuits. This allows us to reflect on what we've chosen to do with our time. And maybe it doesn't feel as important as it once did, or maybe it feels even more important than ever. Maybe it hasn't changed at all. If you're spending more time at home than usual, you might be reminded more readily of the things you're truly interested in, the things you hang up on the wall to remind yourself of what you like, the books you haven't read yet that have sat on your shelf for years, the friends you've been meaning to call, all those little projects you started and never finished because you didn't have to look at them all that often. And now you're seeing them every day, and you really need to clean your storage unit, and you really need to learn how to make bread. Today is the day you're going to make your first sourdough. Working from home, for those who aren't used to it, can feel clunky, unnatural. Absurd, ugly pieces of ergonomic furniture best safe for studios or office buildings. For others, it might be easier to settle into. If your practice is more solitary, then maybe it's not so different. But it is different. This sedentary mode we so easily slip into has become more pronounced. There are no kettlebells left at Rebel Sport. There's actually no kettlebells left in the country, and they're having to manufacture more. And now we have a bit more time to confront things that we might have otherwise distracted ourselves from by overworking, by keeping a busy social schedule, or by just doing other things. Now we have a real opportunity to think about how we've chosen to spend our time, how we spend our time. It's all blending into the same kind of day. The weekends are anticlimactic. And amongst all this, there just doesn't seem to be as much urgency to do the things that aren't completely necessary. How do we realign our purpose from here? And secretly, I'm thriving. I mean, I haven't really spoken to many friends. I could pick up the phone, but I don't have all that much to say. I'm retreating. It feels like borrowed time. Like every night is that Saturday night I decided to spend at my studio. I've settled into this distracted but quiet pace. I'm planning, sorting, organizing, making lists, and slowly circling back around to, what was I going to do again? I'm lucky I have 2 jobs. I work part-time as a sound and music supervisor for an experiential design and creative tech company called Art Processes. And this is a collage I made when I hit the 5-year mark. Clearly not exercising very good design skills, apologies to everybody. But here's just a bit of a sense of some of the stuff that I work on in that job. And I'm also a musician, an artist and performer. On my non-art processes days, I work on music-related tasks. I write, produce, release, and perform under the name Sui Zhen. It's my middle name, given to me by my grandfather, who is Chinese Malaysian. When I was 18, I got a tattoo. It was just as I started to use Sui Chen as my music project name, and I got the tattoo Sui Chen in cursive. For years, I was shy about it. Now maybe enough years have passed that it's just another marker of time. Tattooing my name was impulsive but deliberate. It was the only thing I felt like I could commit to being all the time, like a promise to myself to always make music, a permanent reminder of the one thing in my life that continually gave me a sense of purpose. And we're just watching some clips of where it's led me to. This is from the video Infinity Street. So now we're going to have a quick little peek into my process. Very quickly, I'm going to jump into what a shot list looks like. Here's some photography by Gregory Crewdson, picnic at Hanging Rock references, location scouting, the car that I saw on the street that turned out to belong to a friend who I then borrowed the car from. This is how I kind of map out my ideas in scenes, much like films, much like a film production. Lots of scenes by windows. These are films by Eric Romer, a French filmmaker who I really like. And you have this kind of picture here, which is, if we look at a video clip, you can see the reference to the photography there with the car and the light and the framing and the angle of the car. And this scene here directly referencing, it's directly referencing that other image we just saw. So if I jump back into it, so you can see that I spent a lot of time visually mapping out my work, even though it's predominantly musical. So currently I'm researching, and researching can take many forms: writing, reading, mood boarding, demoing, recording, and a lot of documenting. So here I'm interested in astral travel at the moment. Well, I'm getting back interested in astral travel, and this is just a Pinterest board that I've been building for the last year. Sometimes research involves a lot of watching. I watched the entire series of Mad Men over the last 3 weeks. In the evenings only at first, and then it started to creep into my day on my second monitor, and then I just fully committed. Like many artists, I'm obsessive, and I approach a TV binge with the same sense of purpose I have in finishing a new demo or a music commission. I've been oscillating between these two worlds, living in the presence of my own experience and escaping into worlds created by others. Sometimes escaping into other stories helps to create distance between what's happening around me so that I can get perspective, like a long walk down a bush track. There are things I want to understand and emotionally process, and I found that making and sharing music is a pathway to that comprehension. A piece of music can be the perfect setting for me to connect my feelings, when sometimes feelings are so layered and complex it's hard to articulate. Music is a universal language. It is also like a time capsule. I can look back on the projects I've completed, to music I've released, and aesthetics I've explored, and see a version of life events encapsulated somewhere within. Looking at a recent example, and to this character of Linda that I've used to frame my last album, Losing Linda, around, might tell you some things. Characters, for example, are a way for me to set the tone and pull you into my story. This character is not quite of this world. They don't look quite right. And why is that? The idea for Linda first came to me as I was wrapping up the promotion of Secretly Susan, which is this pink album in the bottom corner. The way we package up our ideas for presentation provides more opportunities for storytelling, and I like to take full advantage of this. I wanted the next album to use another alliteration, but I didn't yet have the L word in mind. I didn't know what that adjective would be. I just knew that Linda felt right. And so it started with the name, an impression of someone. I've worked across creative technology and music production and performance for over a decade. During this time span, a lot of things have happened in my interior life. Revelations about childhood, relationship endings and beginnings, learning how to be assertive, pushing outside my comfort zone, learning how to commit to ideas or projects or people, learning when to walk away, learning how to apologize and to admit to being wrong, and connecting back to intuition and my gut feeling. It's not surprising that my creative output reflects both this immersion in new technologies, but also the personal navigation of these learnings. And ultimately, it is through life experience that material is created. Whilst my work may appear conceptual on the surface, opaque enough for some that it requires context to make a connection, I still like to think that the music exists beyond all that. The rest is world building for those who wish to dive deeper and feel the mood more prescriptively. So if you are interested in going deeper, I can recommend going to my website, which again, I'm going to jump out of this, which is livingmemory.suizhen.com.au, where you can actually wake up Linda. And then they ask you a question, what do you see when you sleep? I see madmen characters talking to me. And so there's soundscapes, a few more questions, and then you're thrown into a video world. Where should I go? Stay home. Right. Let's get out of that. So these are the kinds of, I guess, process pictures in this slide right here that leads to a project like that. So Linda is a result of a process of documentation, copies of copies. I wanted to explore what happens when you take the quest for AI intelligence into a DIY space. Initially, I was interested in creating a model using my head as a subject in the virtual space. The costing for a 3D model rig and animation versus a silicon model were comparable at first. The character was the key to unlocking the aesthetics of the visual world, so I needed to design this first. But something huge happened. My mum got a bad diagnosis of terminal pancreatic cancer, and a week afterwards, I was in Sapporo on an art residency with the intent to create a new body of work, but my reason for being there had shifted. There was the knowledge that I needed to be somewhere else, that this trip and indulgence in a creative pursuit was such a privilege. Instead of writing for the purpose of the new album, I had to write music to feel my purpose. Writing music was a way to get through the day with all these complex emotions in preparation of grief and in preparation for performing my duty as a daughter. So speaking of daughters, this is my first mood board, mood piece that I made pre-Linda, based on the digital daughter, Saya.
Saya
the Saya wasn't my 3D render, but a Japanese artist couple made Saya, their digital daughter. So if you Google, research that up online, you'll find a bit more info about Saya. It's quite creepy. So I wanted Linda to embody whatever that motivation is, to create a digital daughter and call it Saya. After 2 or so years since inception, I had written, recorded, and produced a new album of music, but the character Linda still loomed without a form. My mother had passed away, and I needed some distance from the album material. I started new collaborations, working on ambient scores of music for exhibitions or live scores for film screenings. This kind of music was easier to create. It was without language, mostly mood-based and scene setting. For art processes projects, I had other frameworks and structures to respond to, working with mobile location-aware technologies to provide evolving soundscapes for people as they move through gallery spaces. Applying my interpretation of other people's stories into a musical response gave me distance, and this distance from my own story allowed me time to heal while still working as a musician. So here we're looking at some of the ways I might map out a soundscape for an art processes project. There are different layers, narrative, sound effects, and atmosphere, and they're triggered based on location as you move through the space. As the months passed, I returned to Linda as a ghostly apparition, a mirror to my grief. I couldn't let go of the idea of the mask. It no longer made sense for me to use only technology to create this character. It wasn't original. We've seen human replicas in gaming for years, though they were becoming much more realistic. But for me, it didn't convey the right message. So much of what I took from my experience of caring for my mom was about human life, our biology, and how intrinsic our living bodies are to who we become. Though through making the mask, I was freezing a version of myself in time. The silicone molded around the positive and negative impressions of my facial features. My version of Linda would animate only with a performer inside, and it would distort around the features of that performer. It would never look like me. Linda is an impression of self, only a projection. Linda would never be complete. When I was first interested in the becoming of humanness within AI intelligence, I was now only consumed by the things that are lost along the way. So this is just some of the different molds that you need to make to create a mask like this. That's the negative impression, which is ultimately the most scary one. It's like the inside of your head. It's frightening. And these are just different versions of having compressed the mask to eventually end up with this. So it's something that you can actually wear, which is a lot more, I guess, a lot more of a process than you might think about, and takes a lot of time and persistence. What it all amounted to was a performance like this. And it's kind of evolved even further now with more mood-based lighting approach and theatrical stage design to have this kind of feel. obvious when you're focused on these kinds of complex creative goals that you can forget to allow time for big life events, the threat of huge loss of having a child or nurturing relationships, a global pandemic lockdown, which reminds me that the creative process is daily. The creative purpose is daily. It is in the activity of creating, practicing, thinking things through. And the good ideas, I think they hang around. And once they hang around long enough, they become more than ideas. They become a part of the story you want to tell. And that gives you purpose. When I'm sick of my own thoughts and limitations, I reach out to others, I collaborate, and if I involve other people, then that can stimulate that sense of purpose. I need to show up and let's see where things go. When I don't have something to say because I'm not in the mood, I'll experiment and maybe I'll make ambient mood-based music that exists in the absence of a story. An important feature of my practice is that creating the space for it to exist. Within routines, within an apartment, within the rhythm of my day-to-day. That space needs to be there to create the opportunities for things to happen. And sometimes nothing is going to happen. So I do something else that makes me feel good, like climbing a mountain, or I might fill that space with a TV binge. I might involve other people in my life. Or I might make sourdough. That's the end of my talk. And thank you. And this is where it all started. Me and my brother sitting on our couch, playing guitar.